You can hear my dog in the background. She's drinking. She's very thirsty. It's a little bit warm. It's not too bad, but I closed the windows because it was going to get warm. This always begins with me talking about the weather in Texas, and let me tell you, I apologize for that. My hair looks so stringy and gross. I don't understand. Here, we'll do it this way. Tutorial Tuesday, how to put your hair in pigtails. I don't like wearing a ponytail when I'm like on camera or something because I like to be able to see my hair. So impromptu pigtails will have to do. Good morning. Welcome to Tutorial Tuesday. So as per usual, none of you helpful people give me any ideas as to what I should teach or learn today. Honestly, I want to go a little bit fast today because I took the day off work, which means nothing anymore, but I actually using PTO time, paid time off time, because Ben took the day off work. I forget why. He had a very specific reason, like why he had to take time off work, and then why he chose it to be today, or maybe he didn't. I don't know. But he took today off work, so we both took today off work. It's going to be an adventure day, and by adventure day, I mean we might go to the hardware store. So sorry, my ear itches. I probably shouldn't be scratching it. But today, I wanted to talk to you briefly about some my coffee, I haven't had it yet. So please do just be patient with me. Also, this light is just terrible, right? It's just very bad. But I don't want to move too much. That'll do, maybe. I don't know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about tarot cards. I don't know a lot about tarot cards, and as per usual with Tutorial Tuesday, I should not be the one telling you anything about these. I can tell you a little bit of the history. Like when I say tarot cards, you probably think of, I forget what they're called, something white or something weight. Smith Waite. Yeah, Rider Waite, which is from 1910, and they're the most popular decks used in the English-speaking world. There are lots of different tarot, though, and also the Rider Waite is it's not just the specific design of the deck with the I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, then you are thinking of these very turn of the century I don't know how to describe them. Big bold colors, lots of yellow, sort of comical looking images that look like they were drawn by sort of like a child or someone who was, well, no, I guess a child isn't fair. I'm looking at this. They're just very stylistically specific. But anyway, the Rider-Waite deck. You want to sign? Hey, that's my pajamas. You leave those in here. She's a very dog. But the Rider-Waite deck is also it determines the assortment of the cards, which cards are in the deck, and how they relate to each other. So there are lots of different kinds of tarot. I'm only really familiar with the Rider-Waite deck. And by really familiar, I do just mean like I've been playing around with it for the past couple weeks. So what is tarot, you may ask? And that's a good question. I don't know enough about it. It started as a game. It started legit as a in like the Middle Ages, the mid 15th century. It was just they were another set of playing cards, and they were specifically they were specific kinds of decks based on like which country or culture you were a part of, and they're very related to the decks, like a deck, just a regular deck of cards that we have now. There is in tarot, as I know it, there is the major arcana, which is a set of, I think, 15 cards. No, 20, maybe 25. See, I don't know that much about it. And then there is a set of, really, it might be 52 cards. That is the minor arcana. And that is even divided into suits, 4 suits of, I believe, 13 cards each. And so you can really see the connection between playing cards that we use today and tarot cards that have developed into whole. Oh, okay. So each suit is 14 cards. So ace to 10, and then 4 face cards: a king, queen, knight, and page. In this deck particularly, they are king, queen, I think it's knight, king, queen, knight, and princess. And then there is the 21 card major arcana, and then the single card is the Fool. And I've always thought of the Fool. Oh my goodness, I just put them together and I didn't want to. But I've always thought of the Fool as part of the major arcana. I'm not sure whether it is or not. And it is sort of the beginning of the major arcana. But this is where it sort of gets interesting, at least from my perspective. The major arcana in particular show they symbolize a journey that someone will go on from infancy, innocence, naiveness, ignorance, to knowledge, understanding, in some cases enlightenment, or full oneness with the world, or just basically full understanding and completion of humanhood, I guess. And each card in the major arcana is a step along that way, but the Fool is supposed to be the person who is undergoing it. So it could be said that it is not. And I do note on my cards, on my deck, each card has a number next to it, hopefully in Roman numerals, because why not? And the Fool has 0. So all the other cards are numbered 1 to 21, and then the Fool is 0. So I would suggest that the Fool is separate from the major arcana. So what I wanted to talk about today specifically was the ways in which I individually, I guess, use tarot. I wouldn't. Tarot for many groups of people is, while it started as a game, it moved relatively quickly within a couple hundred years into more of a religious practice, or at least a spiritual practice of divination and cartomancy. Just the idea of cartomancy is really interesting to me. There's I'm going to be sort of culturally insensitive here, I guess, but there's a class in the role-playing game Pathfinder. It actually might be cartomancer, but or oracle, I think is what it is. She has a deck of cards, tarot cards, or another thing of cards, and she uses them to as part of her abilities, and she can use them to divine the future or to cast spells and various other things. And so I always imagine a Yu-Gi-Oh sort of situation where it's like, heart of the cards. Yu-Gi-Oh, hey, I'm wearing my Blue Eyes White Dragon t-shirt, so maybe there's a trend here in my life. But the cards that I wanted to talk about today come from the major arcana, and I wanted to talk about them because they're very evocative to me of something I've been thinking about more recently, just because I can, and not because there's any particular thing in the world that's telling me to, but just I think because it's just been an interesting place to sort of divert my attention lately. But I've been thinking a lot about the role of symbols in language and society specifically, or more generally. Bring my pajamas in here. You're gonna take them outside. I want you to bring them in here. Go get them. She's not gonna get them. She's not that well trained. But yeah, so I was thinking about this. I wrote a blog post for today about emoji as part of language, and that came more out of my recent transition to significantly more texting based communication with people, but the symbol or the concept of symbols being a part of language and having a ever-changing, evolving role in conversation and thought is sort of this nebulous idea in my head that's very interesting. So one of the things that I find interesting about tarot is it reminds me of I don't know, structured poems. So things like sonnets, villanelles, because in those, when you're writing a sonnet or a villanelle or whatever, you're very constrained. A villanelle, especially, I've never written one, but they are, it's a very specific kind of built poem where one line is repeated every so often. The rhyming scheme is not one that like is sing-songy or like easily recognized. And then I think it is iambic, possibly even iambic pentameter. But anyway, in the writing of a villanelle, the artistry comes out in the way that you interact with those rules, uh, and the way in which those rules that you're following in order to write a villanelle are part of the message of the poem. So they become this like backdrop or undercurrent that you you sort of like call on in your writing, and that's like why you wouldn't write a villanelle if you wanted it to be like sing-songy and free verse. You would just write sing-songy free verse. But if you want to write a villanelle, there's a reason you chose that particular structure, and you need to work with it in order to make it make the poem be what you want it to be. And I think tarot cards represent that. Tarot cards and emoji and those sorts of things represent that for me in a more, well, a less like art specific way. When you're doing a tarot card reading, at least from my sort of practice and understanding, because I am not one of the people groups for whom this is a spiritual practice. I think of it as a way of structuring my thought and organizing my thought. And when I use the cards and a specific like spread of reading to do that, it forces me to sort of align my thoughts with those cards and in that spread, and that brings out concepts or emotions or values that I wasn't thinking about otherwise, because specifically those structures are what brought them out. So they allow you to do a little bit of not deeper introspection into yourself, but there have been a few times now where I've been sort of spinning my wheels, trying to deal with anxieties or think of problems, and try to come up with solutions, or just try to come up with any sort of closure or conclusions. And tarot helps me think about those things, be they problems that I have to solve or problems that are already solved that I'm just like not happy with the solution, or just like general anxiety about certain things that are coming up or certain things that are happening. Tarot helps me to think about them in ways that I can almost guarantee I have not thought about them before, and that widens my perspective on the issue, or on at least my experience of the issue. And that can be really helpful, especially when it comes to anxiety, because anxiety draws you into a sort of a spiral that just like you wear a path in the ground as you're walking down it, and you're thinking the same thoughts and they're not going anywhere and they're not helping. And sometimes they don't even make sense, but you're just like stuck thinking them. And tarot can sort of like yank you out of that because of its structure and the way that it forces you to think about things that are not what you thought about before. That's it. So what I wanted to talk about for Tutorial Tuesday was some of the cards that I keep trying to call them my favorite cards, but I don't think that really makes a lot of sense. They're just the cards that are really evocative to me right now. And I will try. I've been trying to like memorize their like established meanings, because that's part of the point, again, in the structure of reading tarot, is like being able to call the your own memory of what it means. because if you have to look it up every time, if it's like an encyclopedia that you have to look up, it loses some of the sort of emotional and connective tissue that comes from within you. So if you have to look it up every time, you're going to have a sort of a more clinical, as clinical as tarot can be. I suppose it's like very hard to make it like rote or like scientific or like that sort of thing. But it's but as much as it can be that, if you have to look it up every time, that's what it's going to be. But so I've been trying to memorize what these actually mean, but I am going to look them up when I tell them to you, because I want to make sure that I get them right, and because sometimes I'll like conversely, as a counterpoint to the idea of not looking them up regularly. Sometimes when you look them up, the other like things that you had forgotten about sort of stick out to you. So we're going to start with the Fool. The Fool is a really interesting card to me. I think it's interesting to me mostly because of the concept of the Fool in the in like Shakespearean plays, primarily Shakespearean plays, but other plays as well. The Fool is, like I said before, it is the first card in the major arcana, or it is not part of the major arcana, and it symbolizes the reader, the person who is doing the reading, and their journey from fool to whatever an enlightened fool is. So there's a lot of different things that can come to mind when you think of the Fool. And usually in tarot decks, the art is supposed to help you, like, be a thing for you to use to sort of like imagine or to sort of evoke the meanings of the cards. I'm not super familiar with this deck, so I don't really know the ways in which the art sort of evokes the different the how it evokes the different meanings of the different cards. But so sorry, I was just looking at the Wikipedia entry for the Fool, and it looks like I should not be using Wikipedia for this because it's not super easy to navigate, and it is difficult to understand. But the Fool symbolizes the beginning of a journey, and it symbolizes the person who is on that journey. So it symbolizes the kind of person who undertakes a journey, who undertakes sort of an adventure. Okay, who undertakes an adventure. Think about, or at least when I think about this, I think about Frodo and Sam at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, or Bilbo at the beginning of The Hobbit. They don't really know what they're in for. They have some idea that it might not be great or that there are going to be hardships along the way, but they cannot, like, nobody could ahead of time guess what it was going to be that they would experience. And that is true of anybody who starts an adventure. You might know like which direction you're going to go, or like you might be able to look at a map and say which way you're going to go and what you're going to see on the way, but you have no idea what is going to happen between the beginning and the end, and how that is going to change you or affect you. So the Fool represents the person who's at the beginning of a journey, the person who is full of excitement, hope, naiveness, naivete. I don't know. Naivete sounds, whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but I don't like that word. It's a weird word. But like sort of like optimism and like mostly like excitement for the future. Even if the future might hold some sort of like darkness. Um, it also, as a symbol, it does represent a person. So a lot of cards can, especially the minor arcana, can represent more concepts or events or ideas. But this does represent a person. So when you read it, when you draw it and put it into a spread, one of the structures that it's asking you to acknowledge is this idea of a person. So you have, that's one of the ways in which it tries to fold your thought into a structure. It's not just the idea of the beginnings. It's not just the idea of naive behavior or thought. It is the person who has those thoughts and the kind of person. Maybe it represents a specific person in your life, or maybe it represents you in a stage that you are in right now, or have been previously, or should try to get back to. But it represents a person in some way. So you have to think about that when you read it. Another one that I'm thinking about right now, and this just now occurred to me as like this being sort of timely, is the hermit. So in this one, in this, you can see she's in just like a single room. And it almost looks like one of those optical illusions where the room, is it coming in, or is it in the back here? Is it pushing out away from her, or is it going towards her? So the hermit is, when you think about the religious concept in Christianity and possibly other religions too, I'm not aware of, the hermit in Christianity in the Middle Ages was a religious figure, someone who was just so pious, so in tune with, or at least desiring to be so in tune with the divine God, that they were like a nun or a monk on steroids. They would leave whatever it was. They would leave the monastery or the convent because it was too secular for them, and it was too loud. They couldn't hear God's voice there, and all they wanted to do was read the scriptures and pray to God for. Sometimes it was like a specific period of time. It was like a couple years or like an era of their life. Sometimes people would do it and then they would go there until they died. But as a symbol to me, and again, I'm only able to draw on the studies that I've done about the tarot, but the symbol of the hermit to me is someone who forsakes most other things, things of comfort and things of safety, maybe. Safety not as much, maybe, but that they forsake other things in search of spiritual or intellectual perfection. And again, the hermit represents a person. It could represent you. It could represent someone in your life that you think is sort of cloistering themselves away in order to achieve some sort of enlightenment. the other interesting thing about tarot that comes up, especially for me in the Hermit, is that when you draw them, you might draw them upside down. And you draw them upside down, that's called reversed. And they have a different meaning if they're upside down. When they're drawn right side up, they're in their balanced position. So this is sort of like when things are going the way they should, then a hermit is a person who is seeking enlightenment, and seeking and is forsaking these things out of a search for enlightenment. When it's reversed, it might mean something else. It might be someone who is forsaking things, and sort of and not finding what they're looking for, or someone who has had things taken away from them, and in so doing finds a kind of spiritual or intellectual depth that they didn't have before. And it has a different meaning. It's imbalanced. Things are not ordered in the world where this is reversed. And so the symbol changes from being what you expect a hermit to be and what a hermit maybe, the ideal hermit should be, to being what a hermit might be in a world where things aren't going the way that they were designed to go. So that's the Hermit. I really like the tarot that symbolize people, individuals, archetypes of people, because I don't know why. I think I like trying to imagine what that person would be, who that person is, trying to figure out in my life and in my friendships and relationships who that person is, or who is most to that person. And if there isn't one, why isn't there? Like, why don't I come across a hermit? Quick answer would be like, they're hermiting. They're hiding themselves away. So like, why would I see them? But, that sort of simplifies it. But I like the concept of trying to imagine people as these concepts. And that interests me. The last card that I'm going to talk about, because I'm running out of time, is one that I've really been thinking about a lot. And again, this is timely, and I didn't even really think about it, but the Tower. So the Tower, there are a lot of Christian themes in tarot cards, and I think that's just comes out of the nature of them having been created in the Middle Ages. They were born in a time when there was no separation between the secular and the religious, and they were born, or at least the ones that came out of Europe were born into a world where everything had religious imagery in it, because that was I don't know, it was like the pop culture thing. It's like, a couple of years ago when everything was vampires, it was like that. But like everything was God, and everything was like, everyone knew the Bible. It was the story that everybody knew. So it was the story that everybody used to tell other stories. And the Tower is reminiscent of a story in the Bible called the Tower of Babel. In the story in the Bible, I don't remember which people group it was, but God's people built a tower, and they had this dream of building a tower all the way to the heavens, and they believed it would draw all the other humans to them, and would it symbolized to them in the story, it symbolized this concept of like, we've made it. If we can build this tower, we're done. We've accomplished everything that we need to accomplish. We're done. We're good. But in the Tower of Babel story, God actually tears down the tower, and he also separates people into languages and people groups in that way. He gives the world language in that story, so that different people groups couldn't talk to each other. So they couldn't come back together to build this tower again because they all had different languages. Like the religious aspects of that, the theological implications of that story aside, because I don't want to get into that right now, although I find it fascinating also. The tower symbolizes both that human desire to have a finish line, to be able to say we're done, we did it, whatever it is. And then also because it's a tower, it can fall, and so in a symbolic sense, it is the destruction of human comfort and human achievement, human belief in their own superiority. So one way that this has been on my mind lately, or one reason this has been on my mind lately, is because of all the institutions and ways in which society is reeling right now. Even though we've thought for a long time, or many of us have thought for a long time, that we are the pinnacle of human achievement, that we have the political system, the governing system, the financial system, the health system that is the best ever in the history of the world. And it might be, like, I'm not saying that it's not, but the idea of the tower falling suggests, like, so what? Like, because the tower falls, sort of like in the rainforest, when a tree falls in the rainforest, is anyone there to hear it? But when a tree falls in the rainforest, it feeds the rest of the trees, right? Like it allows new plants to start the race for sunlight. It opens up a hole in the canopy for things that are on the ground to grow, and it also feeds the soil. It's important for trees to die. And so it's important for towers to fall as well, because it shows us the ways in which we are lacking, the things that we can make better. The idea of completing your achievements is also the idea of stagnation. And so it's only in the breaking down and the failure of those things that we might be able to see how we can still innovate and how we can still make things better. So that's the tower. And it's just, as a symbol, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. But it's also like when I was reading through the cards meanings for the first time, those 3 cards stood out to me. It's cards that I don't know if it's just that they were interesting, or if it was that I felt that they meant something extra special, or that they just resonated with me and how I feel right now. But that's sort of one of the reasons that I really like tarot is it's very subjective. It's like 1,000,000,000% subjective. And but it's subjective in a way that, like I said, forces you to think about more than just yourself. It's definitely pulling at your own thoughts and your own beliefs and your own values in a sort of like self-indulgent way, because it values your thought over anybody else's, because your thought is the only thing that's happening when you're like reading a tarot card. But the concept of symbols in general forces you to think about history and other people who have thought about this, and the people who designed the cards, and the people who came up with the tools that you're using. I'm like really annoyed at how these look. Like this one looks like perfectly like curly, and this one's just like I wouldn't mind if they both look like this, or if they both look like this, but either way. Symmetry is hard. Anyway, that's a very distracting note to end on, but that's the note I'm going to end on for now. I was thinking about doing Tarot Tuesdays instead of Tutorial Tuesdays because I'm not good at coming up with things to do for Tutorial Tuesdays, and y'all are not very forthcoming in your ideas. The two of you who were watching this the whole time. So yeah, so that's a thing that I'm thinking. Sort of like I changed Wandering Wednesdays to Welcome to Compass Wednesdays in order to make it easier on myself to come up with these things. I might do that. If you come up with more tutorial ideas, I probably won't, but or maybe I'll switch it up a little bit and every once in a while do a tutorial or do a tarot or something like that. But that's sort of all I've got for today. Y'all have a good day, have a good Tuesday, make good choices, don't do drugs, stay in school. You still got some school left. Everyone's got some school left. Don't forget the tower. If you think you're done with school, that tower's gonna fall. So yeah, have a good day, and I'll see you when I see you.